Hey everybody, Tim Ulbrich here, and thank you for listening to the YFP podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your path towards achieving financial freedom. This week, I welcome Dr. Brooke Griffin, who is a coach and mentor through several pharmacy organizations and speaks nationally on various professional development topics, including the importance of coaching and mentoring, time management, and work-life integration. In 2022, she launched her business Bold Idea Group with a mission to inspire bold ideas from within. During the show, we discuss her career journey in pharmacy, why and how she started Bold Idea Group, and lessons that she has learned along the way, including advice that she would give her former self, both as it relates to her academic career and starting the business. Our next YFP webinar is just around the corner on October 7th at 9 p.m. Eastern. This free webinar, titled Aliquot Investing Small Investments in Big Real Estate Investing, will be led by YFP Real Estate Investing podcast co-hosts Nate Hedrick and David Bright. This webinar will explore how syndications fit into a well-rounded real estate investment strategy, especially for busy pharmacists who don't have time to source, vet, and manage real estate investments. In this webinar, David and Nate will be joined by Alex Cartwright, an economist who has also led syndication projects, including one in which both David and Nate have invested themselves. You can learn more about this webinar and register at yourfinancialpharmacist.com/syndication. All right, let's hear from today's sponsor, First Horizon, and then we'll jump into my interview with Dr. Brooke Griffin. Does saving 20% for a down payment on a home feel like an uphill battle? It's no secret that pharmacists have a lot of competing financial priorities, including high student loan debt, meaning that saving 20% for a down payment on a home may take years. For several years now, we've been partnering with First Horizon, who offers a professional home loan option, aka a doctor or pharmacist loan, that requires a 3% down payment for a single-family home or townhome for first-time home buyers, has no PMI, and offers a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage on home loans up to $766,550 in most areas. The pharmacist home loan is available in all states except Alaska and Hawaii and can be used to purchase condos as well. However, rates may be higher and a condo review has to be completed. While I've personally worked with First Horizon before and had a great experience with Tony and his team, don't just take it from me. Here's what Emily from Prattville, Alabama had to say about her experience with First Horizon. Clear communication and excellent guidance from Gail and Cindy throughout the entire process. I greatly appreciated the fact that everything was digital because I'm allergic to paper. The ability to upload and sign everything digitally made the process very efficient, which I prefer. This was by far the best mortgage process I have experienced. This is my 7th when counting refinances. So to check out the requirements for First Horizon's pharmacist home loan and to start the pre-approval process, visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/home-loan. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/home-loan. Brooke, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for having me.
So excited to have you here. This has been a while in the making. We ran across each other at ASHP Midyear in the airport, flying home from California, and reconnected on what you're working on the entrepreneurial sides of things. I said, hey, we've got to have you on the podcast to share your entrepreneurial journey, and we're going to do that. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about your career journey. What led you into the profession? Where did you complete your pharmacy training? And what your focus has been in your academic career?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I feel like our paths have crossed a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And even before I saw you in the airport, you were so generous with your time when we had a phone call when I was just starting this journey and thinking about how to build something while working in academia. So I very much followed in your footsteps. So thank you for going first, Tim, or one of the first, because you inspired me and you helped me a lot that day when we talked. So what got me into pharmacy? Well, I was a very confused high school student and wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I had a huge chip on my shoulder. And I was very stubborn. And I thought I, didn't want to go to school for very long because I was 17 and really stubborn. But I wanted to be able to support myself and have a service aspect to my job that it felt impactful. I feel like a lot of pharmacists say they wanted to help people. I think I was too selfish for that, but I knew I just wanted to have some sort of impact in my role. And so a friend of mine, her older sister was going to pharmacy school, and back in the day before there were like websites and virtual tours that you could go to. You would go to campuses and spend the night with an upperclassman to really get the feel. And so I just fell in love with this idea of going to school for 5 years and having this great degree and being in healthcare, and ended up going to Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and graduated with my PharmD, which ended up taking 6 years, and then it added a residency to that. So my bold idea at age 17 with getting out in 5 years ended up being 7. But I fell in love with pharmacy, basically.
Absolutely. And that led to an academic career that you've been on for some time now. So tell us about your journey into academia. When did you know that was the right path for you, and what's been your focus in that area?
It was during Appies. So I did an academic rotation with one of my favorite professors, Dr. Lynn Sylvia, and she really gave us a behind the scenes look at what faculty do. And it was so much more than what the student sees from the lecture hall. And she introduced us to kind of the three-legged stool of teaching, service, and scholarship, and all of the organizations that faculty are a part of, and how they really enrich their professional development continuously. And I had no idea that this was even an option for me after graduating with a PharmD and then completing a residency. So that really set me on my path. I also had a strong interest in ambulatory care, so that was also solidified during Appies. So thankfully, I found a residency that combined both ambulatory care and a ton of teaching, and that was with Midwestern University. And then when I completed the residency, they offered me a job to stay on.
And we didn't know each other at the time, but very similar paths. I went down a residency in ambulatory care that had an academic component, opened up my eyes to teaching,
Yeah.
scholarship, service. And that's one of the things I loved about academia is, especially for those that like to create and build, there are so many opportunities, whether it's in the classroom teaching, whether it's at a clinical site teaching, whether it's in scholarship teaching, even in service opportunities. Like, there are a ton of ways to be entrepreneurial and build inside of an academic environment. And I think the flexibility that can be afforded there and the creativity that can be afforded there is really unlike many other roles. And you shared with me several weeks ago when we had talked leading up to this podcast that early in your academic career, you went to 4 days a week, a zero point 0.8 full-time position. Why did you decide to go down that path? What did that allow you to do? And how did that help pave the way for others to do that as well?
It was 2009, after the birth of my first child. I had this calling on my heart to work part-time, and I wanted to stay in my current role. And I felt so strongly about it that if it wasn't going to be approved in my current role, I was seriously thinking about what else could I do with my career. So, all you can do is ask. And it was not an immediate yes. And it was a great lesson in that, nothing is given. Even if you are a hard worker and you feel like you're putting incredible value in and day out, your asks are sometimes not always granted. And it really surprised me, thinking that it was, 2009, 2010, and I was really the first person to have this request. We had a couple of part-time faculty who came in as part-time to do some labs and workshops, and that was a little bit different. I was the first one to ask to be reduced. So it took about a year, Tim, for it to get approved through all of the appropriate channels. And if you're in academia, things take a very long time and a ton of non-fillable PDFs. So thankfully I had a couple of, I had a mentor and my immediate supervisor, my chair, who were supportive of me and kind of vouched for me and advocated for me and said, I know Brooke will be able to do this if she goes down to 0.8. And there were some conditions that I had to agree to. And I didn't have your financial pharmacist to lean on at the time to help me navigate that decision. So ultimately, I have no regrets. And really what it did is it gave me that work-life integration that I was looking for. And for some of you who are listening, you may think, well, one day, was that really enough? And for me, it was. I know that there have been other faculty who've been able to go down to 0.6, and that's the right balance for them. 0.8 was the right balance for me. And so what it was able to do then is open up the door for several faculty behind me. And it wasn't necessarily a lot easier, but it was somewhat easier. So there were two faculty that were able to put together a job share proposal. They each were 0.6 to make up a 1.2 FTE. That was really unique. And then we even published an article, Tim, that showed our productivity 18 months
Oh, that's
before
cool.
going part-time and 18 months going after part-time. And who would have guessed it? Our
Hmm.
scholarship was way up 18 months after going part-time.
Mm.
Because, when you start a family and you have limited time in your day and then limited time on the job with being point 0.8 or point 0.6, you know how to get things done in the
Yeah.
precious minutes of the day. And not that anyone is slacking off before, not to say that, but we were just able to really hunker down and fulfill our goals regardless of the point 0.8, point 0.6.
Yeah, forces and efficiency, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That for sure. And if you'll send us that article, we'd love to link that in the show notes. I think others would be
great.
interested in
Yeah,
reading that. And the data helps, right? If people
yes.
are thinking about making some of these proposals. I love what you shared, that all you can do is ask. And even if the answer is no, doesn't mean no forever.
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean that's personal either. I mean, sometimes we're just inside of structures and organizations where they may not be the flexibility or the creativity yet for these positions. I think we're seeing an evolution in this space, thankfully. I love the example you gave of two part-time folks coming together for, a hybrid role. And I think with the right leadership and the right conversations and the right approach, so there can be a solution here, but it doesn't always mean it's going to be on the first ask, right? And I think academic roles, the other one I hear a lot about are VA roles, pharmacists who
Mm,
often will run up against barriers in proposing these types of things, but may get creative with two
hmm,
half-time positions, replacing a
hmm.
full-time clinical role. So
Yeah, you're right. And I think sometimes some leaders fear that I'm going to open the door and the floodgates will
yeah.
open and now everyone will want to request to go part-time. And I can just share from my own experience that was not the case.
Hmm.
There are obviously the majority of faculty who like working full-time and prefer to work full-time. Everyone
Yeah.
has their own unique circumstance. And I'm thankful that they took a chance on me and that it's been a successful model for us.
I have a question related to the passion that you have for your academic work. And I think this is very much going to connect to our discussion around the work that you're doing and what you've been building at Bold Idea Group, your business. And the question relates to running towards something versus running away from something. I talk with a lot of
Mm,
pharmacists that perhaps may not be satisfied in their current role, and the desire for something else very much is a running away from something versus running towards something, and two very different things from an energy perspective, from a mindset perspective, from a motivation perspective. And one of the things you shared with me several weeks ago leading up to this interview is that despite the business growth that you've had and the efforts, that you don't want to leave academia. That's an area for you that has been fulfilling, that work has been able to really align with your passion, your interest, where you're adding value to others. Tell us more about that. Where does that passion for your academic work and role come from, that it allows you to then build something else on the side as well, that you can really be moving towards that effort, not running away from what you're currently doing?
yes, yeah, great question. And I talk with so many pharmacists who are going through the same thing where they feel like they're running away from something. So I can definitely relate to that. I love academia. I love my faculty role. I love working with my colleagues in this space. I love working with students and the next generation of pharmacists. I
Mm,
love the autonomy and all of the flexibility that we talked about earlier that comes
mhm.
with this role. Even if not all of my asks are my choice, I usually have flexibility to make it my own when I do a course or when I do a certain
Yeah.
lecture or workshop. And for me, that's enough. But it hasn't been all roses. I mean, there was a time about 5 years ago when this all kind of started with my side business that I felt really stuck in
Mm,
academia. I reached all of the accolades that you could in academia in terms of associate professor and full professor.
mhm.
I was tenure track with pretty much secured that I was going to achieve tenure, and I just hit a brick wall. And no one really tells you that's going to happen after you reach full professor. And
Mhm.
it was a big time of growth for me because I didn't realize how ambitious I was, and that when I didn't see the next rung on
Mm,
that ladder that's so well laid out in academia, that made me really nervous. And when I realized I didn't really want to ascend in traditional academic leadership roles, that was another sign that, okay, what else is going to fulfill
yeah.
me here? I love my job. There's certain aspects I didn't like about it, um, and there were some days that I really liked my job, but the love was kind of missing. So
Yeah.
I was feeling like I was on this constant seesaw, which made me feel stuck. And that's when I sought out my first coach and really started asking myself some really deep, insightful, hard questions like, what do you want this next chapter of your career to look like? Where is your passion going to come from? And we have a word for that now, and that's job crafting. I didn't have that term when I was going through this on my own. I've kind of scrapped it together by listening to a ton of podcasts and reading a bunch of books and collecting questions and journaling at home. Some of it facilitated by a coach, which was really helpful. So now I look at this time in my career where I am building something on the side that brings me immense joy. And sometimes the day job doesn't provide all of that joy that it once did. That's okay. I have this business on the side, which is doing it for me. But there are certainly aspects about the job that I absolutely love, and I am not ready to leave that yet.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're sharing about being stuck. You're taking me back in my own academic journey. And one of the things that you share that really resonates with me and maybe many listeners as well is that often we don't realize that there's some of these external motivations. Here we're talking about promotion and tenure, right? Where, said or unsaid in the system, we're kind of trained to be like, that's the definition of success, right? And you see this language used all over the place in different types of books or resources. This is not a pharmacist academic or even a pharmacy type of thing. What we're talking about is climbing a first mountain, climbing a second mountain type of discussion. And I think when you check off those boxes, which are a necessary part of the process, they have value. And getting to that point, I think, where you realize like, hey, I've checked those boxes. Those are all external affirmations that may or may not always align internally. And what I hear you sharing is you're beginning to build the business and have been building the business is there's very much an inside out type of motivation of what you're building and how you're serving and helping others. And that is a whole different level of achievement, success, whatever you want to call it. Joy is a word that I heard, and obviously the work that you're doing to serve others as well. So I love how you painted that picture. Really, really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head when I was feeling stuck and relying on some of those external validations for success. I couldn't really name my strengths and the values that I brought to the table. And it was really hard for me to see how I was adding value every day to the job. And I realized that this is going to be an internal job to figure this out. And that's when I made a commitment to myself that I'm going to invest in myself and figure this out. And I wouldn't be successful as a business owner today if I didn't do that work. If I didn't have such a strong idea of who I am and how I'm showing up and what value I bring and what my strengths are. But that's a lot of hard work of self-discovery to get there. And some of us choose to stay in the discomfort, and because, the future is uncertain and, we're not sure what this is going to uncover. But I was willing to take that risk because I knew I wanted this next chapter to be fulfilling. The other thing that was really helpful to me was there's this podcast called Disrupt Yourself with Whitney Johnson. She's got this concept of an S curve. And she says that when you reach mastery in anything that you do, you're at the top of the S curve and you're ready to launch. You're ready to jump onto something new, because as humans, we need to get to the bottom of the next S curve to learn something new, to gain mastery in something. And we're constantly doing this throughout our careers. So that was really insightful for me to see, okay, I'm at the top of my S curve. I'm ready to learn something new. I'm ready for a new challenge. But it's not going to be leaving my job and finding a new job. It's going to be finding a passion project that aligns so well with my strengths and my values. And now I get to use those tools in the day job, and I get to use those tools with my business.
Yeah, Brooke, it sounds like as you were going through your own journey, as you described the S curve, it really forced some deep reflection questions that are big, scary questions. Who am I? Who am I? What do I want? And this is why I think these earlier stages are so important, that the goal shouldn't be to avoid some of these walls we, find ourselves butting up against, and some of these bigger questions that come, because it's through these moments that I think we're afforded the opportunity for some of the self-discovery. And I don't think this ends either, which is beautiful, very beautiful.
Yeah, no, you're just reminding me of something that during this time that I felt really stuck. I couldn't really identify what made something a good day or what made something a bad day. I knew that I would leave with certain feelings. And so what I kind of forced myself to do was to just jot down a couple of notes at the end of each day, like what really lit me up today and what really brought my energy down. And this quick exercise, even just after a few weeks, I started to see some patterns, Tim, that it was
Hmm.
always these types of activities that lit me up. And it was always these one or two people that really brought my energy down. So that helped me find some lanes to stay in
Yes.
terms of if I'm going to push myself forward, if I'm going to do something outside of work, if I'm going to capitalize on my strengths, it's in these areas that would be a great start.
And I think that's great advice for our listeners that may be feeling some of that restlessness. Sometimes this presents as chronic irritability, chronic anger, right? At this undertone type of level. But like what's behind that? And just journaling on it, getting curious.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you shared about like what are those activities, what are the moments of the day where you feel like regardless of time spent, you feel like it's energy filling, bucket filling. And what are those
Yes,
moments and times of the day, regardless of time spent, where you're like, oh my gosh, if I had to do that for 15 more minutes, I'm going to go crazy. Right. And
that's
not to
exactly
say
it.
we're going to find ourselves in roles that those things necessarily go away. I mean, I can even speak as making that transition from, what was the dream right into owning my own business. Like there are real challenges. There are highs. There's our lows. This is part of life. But I think being equipped with some of those things where it's like, hey, these are the areas that I really feel like I'm in that zone of genius and I really can contribute and align the time I'm spending, the energy I have with the efforts that hopefully can come out of that. I want to ask you, I think many pharmacists, and I'll put myself in this category as I started the business back in 2015, really struggle with the idea of making an investment in themselves in the form of something like hiring a coach. You mentioned how integral that was in your own journey. And I think there's several factors. It's an investment of time, it's an investment of money, and it's raising your hand to say, I really want to look internally and put that mirror up, right? And get into some
Mm-hmm.
of the uncomfortable space. So, how are you able to get over that hump to say that I am going to make an investment of time, of money? I am going to make this investment of self discovery without necessarily knowing where that was going to go on the other end.
Yeah, great question. And I think this is something that a lot of people do face because it's not only time, it's money, it's energy.
Yep.
You don't want to pay for something and kind of just put 50% in. So for me, it really was kind of hitting rock bottom in a professional feeling way, not in
Mm,
a mental health space
yep.
kind of way, but in a I don't know where else to go. I had wonderful mentors, Tim, my entire career. I've been so blessed with wonderful mentors, and there was one who really just saw me for me and could cheer me on with my triumphs and could listen to me cry and not think I was,
Mm,
a mess. And we got to a point where our meetings became more social. I think I just ran out of questions to ask. I didn't know what questions to ask.
mm,
And as a mentor, she wasn't in a position where she could help me because she'd never been there before, which
yep.
that's how mentors help us. They've been to where we aspire to go. So that was a big aha moment for me that I'm going to need a different kind of career support.
Hmm.
I've never had a coach before. I didn't know how coaches could help pharmacists, but it was something I was just willing to try. I work with a lot of faculty, Tim, and for those of you who aren't in academia, a lot of faculty positions have professional development funds that the department allows you to use for
Yep.
books or conferences or travel. So I've worked with a lot of faculty who are able to use some of those funds to for that initial investment. So if, for anyone out there who's considering it, that's just something to keep in mind that we can kind of
Hmm.
think outside of the box about how we can fund something like this.
Yeah, and my personal experiences, I mean, of course, if we can get somebody to help foot the bill, that's great. My personal experiences in us investing in resources that have helped us as we've grown the business, as well as our clients investing in us, is that there's an important step of intentionality that comes when you have skin in the game.
Yes,
Right? I mean,
yes.
this is night and day. I know we've all been told this, but it really is true that, and to be clear, I have invested in coaching services that have been a clear ROI, and I have invested in other coaching services that I look back on that and say I had a great learning experience, and I didn't know all the things going into it, but it wasn't necessarily a positive ROI, and that's going to
Mhm.
happen,
Mhm.
especially as you continue to make this an area of priority. But when you have some skin in the game,
Yeah.
you come with a different mindset. That's just a matter of fact. I can tell you that over and over again from clients that we've worked with, whether it's investing or student loan repayment, any part of the financial plan. When you are making that investment of time and money, you come ready, and I think that very much is going to help yield some of the results. So, with that in mind, let's talk about your business and
Yeah.
offering the Bold Idea Group. We're going to link to the website in the show notes. What is the Bold Idea Group? Give us a 60-second commercial about the problem you're solving and how you're solving that problem.
Sure. I help pharmacists who are feeling stuck in their careers, who need a different kind of career support. So I offer coaching, consulting, and speaking for organizations and individuals who want something different, want a positive change in their career, and they're not sure of the how. And through the coaching process and through this aspect of curiosity and asking really powerful questions and this investment of time and energy and space and holding space for people, we really figure it out, whether it's, work-life integration improvements, a different area of fulfillment, focusing on a specific aspect of your career. I'll tell you, Tim, out of all the clients I've worked with, it is very rarely leaving their current job.
I was just going
It's
to say
really it's really this job
that.
crafting aspect of thinking about, is it a task that needs to be done differently? Is it a relationship that needs to be looked at differently?
Yeah.
Is it a mindset? And most of the time it's mindset. We always start with mindset.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's a difficult conversation that we need to have that we've been avoiding that unlocks things going forward, right? Sometimes it's a different perspective we're bringing into the work culture environment. And I don't know, for some people, they hear that and they're like, darn it. Like, I was hoping that this would help me go, to something else. But I find that very interesting because I think it's easy. And I've been in these moments. It's easy where if we feel stuck, if we feel overwhelmed, confused, frustrated, if we're having those difficulties in the positions, the grass always looks greener on the
Mm-hmm.
other side. And I think with experience, I've come to realize, as I alluded to a little bit ago, that there's always challenges. That's just a part of life. And it's our mindset of how we're approaching those. And if we come at it with a mindset and mentality of, hey, difficult things are going to happen today or this week or this month and this season of life, that's a part of life. How do I see those, learn from those things and continue to move forward? But that doesn't surprise me. It actually excites me that often it's almost helping people get unstuck in their current environments, right?
Absolutely. For even just speaking for myself, when I started working with a coach, everything around me started changing, Tim.
Mm,
My definitely my approach to work, how I showed up at work, but the relationship started changing. And then I thought, wow, okay, I'm changing.
hmm.
I'm changing. And that's what's causing all of these other things
Totally.
to change. And it was just a total positive level up that I needed to fuel this next chapter of my
Yeah.
career.
And I would argue, Brooke, that's richer change,
Yeah.
right? Because that's inside out change, not outside in. I mean, we can change environments,
Yeah.
and that may lead to some internal change, but we're obviously changing things outside of our environment, and that may be the right move as well. But that inside out change, when you go through that self discovery, you look at the mindset, you look at, hey, how am I showing up every day? That's going to transcend any environment you're in, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. I tell the story that there was a colleague at work who I was having a lot of friction with. And I realized that I had some responsibility in that, but I just didn't figure out what was going on, like
Yeah.
why there was all this friction. And our relationship has totally transformed. But, we never went to
Mm,
couples counseling. It was,
right.
it was just I showed up differently. I was able to
Yeah.
just approach the situation totally differently.
Although, to be fair, we could use a version of couples counseling in academia, right?
Somebody start that business, please. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the things I like to talk through with people that have built something is, where did it start and where is it today? And we know the evolution's not over. Of course, you're going to continue to evolve and tweak as you find out, what's having an impact and what meets your needs as well. But for people that are thinking of an idea that maybe they have or something they want to start, whether it's going to generate revenue or not, I think it can be very overwhelming to see someone's current version without understanding how it's evolved. And more often than not, it's evolved over time, right? And it went
Yes.
from idea to version one to version two, version three, four, five, six, and to the current state. And there's been things that have worked, things that haven't worked. And the more we share that, I think it's a breath of fresh air to say, like, Brooke doesn't have it all figured out. Tim
No.
doesn't have it all figured out. Like, I'm learning, and some things work daily, some things don't work daily. So, how does the current version look different from where you started? What has this evolution looked like in the business?
Yeah, great question. One of my favorite quotes by Mel Robbins is confidence is the willingness to try.
Mm.
that it doesn't come after you get success or after you have so many wins. Like confidence comes from trying something and realizing you're going to get back up and try something again.
Mm-hmm.
And that really fueled me in the beginning when I started thinking about, okay, what are my strengths? What are my values? What could I offer this world? Where do I want to have impact? When do I want to have impact? I started with a free group coaching program, and my quote business name at the time, even though it wasn't an established business, was 21st Century PharmD. And it
Mm-hmm.
started as a weekly blog, and I had an Instagram account, and I made my own website from scratch. And I'm not a tech person, so I'm super proud of that experience. And it looked like a non-tech person created a website, and the students told me that the colors hurt their eyes. I mean, it was just an awful version of a website, but I was so proud to put this thing together and publish my
Mm-hmm.
blog there weekly. And I started a little Facebook group where people could get personal and professional development. I thought in the beginning, like you said, the involvement, I thought this was going to be targeted towards students, personal
Mm.
and professional development for students, the things you get outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
And then I offered a group coaching program for students and for faculty for free. That was in 2020. And told them that I'm going to ask you for your feedback on what worked well here. And I'm also going to use this to figure out, do I like coaching? Do I like
Mm-hmm.
facilitating this group? And the answers to both those questions were yes. Yes, people liked it. And yes, I liked it. And then working with another coach, decided, okay, what's really next for me? And all signs were pointing to get coach training. So in 2021, I completed my coaching certification, and then in 2022, rebranded as Bold Idea Group, because I realized that all of this
Mm.
content I was putting out there through the Facebook group and through the weekly blogs, my peers were resonating with the
Yeah.
content, sometimes even more than the students who hadn't been in the workforce yet. I was really speaking to this mid-career pharmacist and the mid-career faculty
Yeah.
member who just didn't know where to go after reaching some success, but all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden felt stuck for a variety of
Yeah.
reasons. So I rebranded in 2022 to be Bold Idea Group, and um, yeah, so that's where we are today, offering group coaching and one-on-one coaching and more speaking engagements.
And I love the rebrand, but I also love the initial version for all the reasons you mentioned, right? What I hear there is you're sharing is that you were willing to try, you were willing to
Mm-hmm.
test, you were willing to tinker and evolve and change, and you were listening to what your audience was saying that was of value to them.
Yes.
And those are some of the best businesses to build. And I think that, if we think about this like an iceberg, right? Often the first thousand, 10,000, $100,000 that a business will earn, that's the tip of the iceberg. Oh, and by the way, what you actually see often, if you translated that to an hourly wage of time invested it took to get there, like maybe minimum wage at best, right? But
Right.
all underneath the water is all of these things behind the scenes that nobody sees. And that's why I say it's so important when people are building something, there has to be an alignment with a very strong why and purpose with the problem you're trying to solve, because it will grind you down otherwise. But back to what we were just talking about previously of time that you spend that can be bucket filling, energy filling, time that you spend that maybe not. When you're building something that you really feel like is adding value, is providing transformation to people, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm guessing you could write several hours on something and there's energy that's coming from that because you can see the impact that it can have. Certainly that doesn't mitigate that it's hard. It takes time. There's other priorities of how you could be spending your time, but I love to hear the evolution of that. That's really great.
Yes, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit too, but a lot of faculty and pharmacists ask me about what it's like to have a side hustle, or where do you
Mm,
find the time, or where do you find the
yeah,
energy, because we know that our academic careers are demanding, and we know that it's not a 9 to 5 job. There's a lot of things you're doing on
right.
nights and weekends to fulfill that role. And the first thing I always tell people is, whatever idea you have for a side hustle, it cannot feel burdensome,
Yep.
because it will not last. It has to be energy giving.
Yep. I remember you took me right back, Brooke, when I've got four boys now, 13 down to five. But when I started YFP, my oldest was four, my second was two, and we were just about ready to have I remember them being very, very young and late nights writing, late nights doing webinar, but it never felt like work.
Right.
It really didn't. And, it was that constant feeling of, providing value, helping people along in their own journey, and just the incredible relationships that have been formed, the amount of learning I've been able to do from talking with individuals such as yourself. So yeah, great wisdom there in what you're sharing. And speaking of trying, you recently started a podcast, Today's Bold Idea, Mindset, Motivation, and Coaching for Pharmacists. We'll link to that podcast in the show notes. What was the thought behind starting a podcast? I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with is I only have so much time. Should I be focused on social media? Should I be focused on YouTube? Should I do a podcast? What led you down that path?
So I mentioned before that when I first started 21st Century PharmD, I had a weekly blog, and I
Yeah,
really loved that weekly blog. And I made a promise to myself I was going to do it weekly for 52 weeks, and I did. I accomplished that goal. And
amazing.
then I took time off to get coaching certification. And
Mhm.
when I rebranded Bold Idea Group, I really wanted to think about what is going to be my venue, what is going to be my forum, what is going to be my way of getting my message out there. And I realized that I wanted to try something different than blogging. And I had this whisper of starting a podcast. I did have a podcast very briefly with 21st Century PharmD, but it was all interview style. So my idea for this podcast was to produce something positive and short that
Mm,
someone could listen to every day before they got out of their car and walked in that door, or in between meetings when they just felt completely like helpless and hopeless. I actually started a podcast, Tim, that I was looking for,
mhm.
a short, brief positivity boost that came from someone who kind of understood this field.
Yeah.
And there are lots of podcasts out there, as you know. I
Mhm.
couldn't find one that was exactly what I was looking for, and I had this joy that was coming from posting daily in my Facebook group. And I thought, well, if that's bringing me so much joy, I wonder what it would be like to produce it in more of an audio format.
Yeah.
And again, let's just try this. Let's just throw some spaghetti on the wall and see what
Mhm.
happens. And it's been really, really incredible, Tim. Just I am getting messages from community pharmacists who have been a community pharmacist for 30 years, telling me that they're thankful that they're able to listen to this. And I'm thankful that I'm a part of their day. I mean, they have so
Amazing.
much on their
Yeah.
plate and
What an
so much
honor.
pressure.
Mhm.
Yes, it's a complete honor. And so we'll see where it goes. And I'm not quite at daily yet. I'm at 3 days a week, but I'm working my
It's
way there.
amazing.
So I also tell myself, and I say this on the podcast, is that I am taking imperfect action every day.
Mhm.
And that's a 3 day a week podcast when you told yourself you would produce daily. So I'm getting there.
I love the short form aspect of it. I was looking at your show stream, 3, 5, 7, 9 minutes, right? Very short
Hmm.
form content, inspirational. It's vulnerable, it's real. So I love what you're doing there. Keep going, keep
Thank you.
building.
Thanks.
I love the commitment too. Whether it's writing or to this, it's so important because I think when you have a new idea, there's inevitably an energy and a surge that comes that you're getting started that eventually you will hit a point, and no matter what you're building, anyone's building, that you're like, what am I doing? Is this worth my time? And to really fight through that and make a commitment to yourself that I'm going to do this for a certain period of time and then reassess, from there. So I,
That's
I,
right.
I love,
Yes, and nothing's a failure. It's all building something.
yeah. I do want to give a shout out here. If any pharmacist is listening, not only to check out Brooke's show, we'll link to that in the show note, but if any pharmacist is listening that is thinking about starting their own podcast, Kim Newlove is a fantastic resource. Kim is the founder of the Pharmacist Voice, a fellow Ohioan, has some great resources available to pharmacists that are thinking of starting their own podcast. And I just love the passion, the energy she has, the way she wants to serve and help others. So we'll link to some of Kim's resources as well in the show notes. Brooke, let's wrap up by doing some reflection backwards. First on your academic career, and then we'll do it on your entrepreneurial career. As it relates to your academic career, what are some key lessons that you've learned along the way? What would you tell your early career academic self?
Another one of my favorite quotes is "Be yourself, everyone else is taken" by Oscar Wilde. And in academia, maybe it's like this in other pharmacy niches. There's a very there's very much a cookie cutter approach to how we do our work. It down to how many lecture hours somebody has, how many APPE students somebody takes, the number of courses people are involved in. There's a model for workload equity that people kind of look the same and do the same things. And even in order to get promoted, the same types of activities are encouraged. It's hard to think outside of the box, and it's hard to be that person in academia. And I found myself a square peg trying to fit herself into a round hole in many aspects, in committee meetings, in courses I was involved in bold ideas that I had that just seemed so completely out of the box that people made it seem like it was unrealistic and unattainable. So I think I would tell myself that you being unique and bringing your ideas to the table is valuable. And sometimes it takes just finding the right ears and the right support to get there. So if you don't have an internal mentor, if you don't see anyone at your institution who kind of gets you, there are so many opportunities to find mentorship in external organizations. Almost every pharmacy org has a mentorship program.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say keep to find that career support so that you don't lose any aspect of your uniqueness.
I love that, and it reminds me, Brooke, of the visual that came to mind as you were sharing. Is that we all have an internal flame that sometimes loses its fire over time, and I think having others around us, mentors, community, colleagues, friends, spouses, whatever, that can really help us identify, see that, and help us reignite that flame is so important. It also reminded me one of my favorite quotes that I listen to every day as a part of a morning affirmation from Rabbi Zeus that says, in the coming world, they will not ask me, why were you not Moses? They will ask me, why were you not Zeus?" So who are, goes back to those questions, right? Who are you? What do you want? And what does that look like? How about on the entrepreneurial side? Obviously, more near-term journey that you've been on, but what are a couple of lessons that you've learned thus far along your entrepreneurial journey?
When I started blogging and I hit publish on that for the very first time, and I had lived in this academic world for my entire career, when even the good ideas take 18 months to see implementation and you need a lot of approvals to get things done. To have an idea, to write about it, and to hit click and publish and have it go out on social media was incredibly freeing. And as nervous and as scared as I was, and even that very first blog hit some, little controversy that I wasn't expecting, and I almost shut down the whole thing. But I think I was really nervous about what my colleagues might say the next Monday. Like, what is everyone going to say about Brooke putting her ideas out there in the world? And now she's got a blog, and who does she think she is? I probably can count on one hand how many people have asked me about that blog out of all the people that I work with. I think people are assuming that everybody's kind of watching each other, but what the experts say is true is that everyone is just so laser focused in their own lane that it just really reinforces that we have to do what feels good to us, as long as we're not harming anybody or saying anything offensive. That if that's the impact you want to have on the world, it really doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I think the other big lesson that I had was being able to embrace the beginner's mindset. When you're in academia for so long, you know how to do a lecture, you know how to run a course, you know how to have API students, you know how to run a committee. When you start a side hustle or start your entrepreneurial journey, you are learning a new language. You are taking baby steps. Everything seems new and everything seems scary. And being able to embrace that beginner's mindset again is something that I really treasure. And there was someone I follow, and she said something like, "You'll never be at this point in your entrepreneurial journey again. This beginning stage is so beautiful, and there's so much growth that happens, from zero to your first 100K. That's just so amazing. You'll never be here again. So cherish all of the ups and downs and the good and the bad that comes during this time."
A lot of wisdom there, and I think the holding the space to allow for the conflicting emotions, as you were talking, it reminded me of like the excitement and anticipation that was present with the fear. Both
Yeah.
were there.
Yeah.
And you even talked about, you didn't use the words inner critic, but when you were sharing of your own journey and publishing that first blog post, like pay attention to those voices. I'm not speaking of Brooke. I'm speaking,
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
broadly, like, well, that's interesting. Like, who is that? What are they saying? Where does that come from? And, I think just an awareness and a curiosity to those will really start to unlock. And that is one of the most beautiful things of this journey. I always say, second to parenting my 4 boys, entrepreneurship has challenged me to grow and stretch in ways I could have never imagined. And those have been painful at times, and they've been beautiful at times, and I wouldn't change it for anything. But I think that holding the space for some of that inner awareness as you're going through not only building whatever you're building, but also what is the transformation that's happening inside as well.
Yeah, well said.
So as we wrap up, what is the best place that our listeners can go to connect with you and learn more about the work that you're doing?
Oh, thank you, Tim. For any listeners who are on Facebook, I have a Facebook group called Bold Idea Group. I post every day at 5 a.m., something inspirational, motivational. I'm also publishing the podcast called Today's Bold Idea, 3 days a week right now, working myself up to daily. My website is boldideagroup.com. And I've been fortunate enough to be invited to a couple of colleges of pharmacy and other organizations to even just present some of these ideas about job crafting, speaking to a larger audience for those of you who aren't necessarily ready for one-on-one coaching or group coaching.
Awesome. We will link to all those in the show notes, the website, the podcast page, the Facebook group, so that folks can go in and learn more and connect with you. So Brooke, this has been amazing. Speaking of energy filling, it has been that for me. So thank you so much for taking time to come on the show and share your journey with our listeners.
Thank you so much, Tim. I had a great time.
Before we wrap up today's show, I want to again thank this week's sponsor of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast, First Horizon. We're glad to have found a solution for pharmacists that are unable to save 20% for a down payment on a home. A lot of pharmacists and the YFP community have taken advantage of First Horizon's Pharmacist Home Loan, which requires a 3% down payment for a single-family home or townhome for first-time home buyers and has no PMI on a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. To learn more about the requirements for First Horizon's Pharmacist Home Loan and to get started with the pre-approval process, you can visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/home-loan. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/home-loan. As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding material should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of Your Financial Pharmacist unless otherwise noted and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.